Do you remember those funny TV shows from the 1980s, the ones that made you laugh so hard you nearly fell off the couch? Back then, these comedies filled living rooms with warmth, canned laughter, and that unmistakable spark of 80s charm. But if they brought us so much joy, why did we ever forget them? When ALF first landed on television screens in 1986, nobody quite knew what to make of it. Here was a sarcastic, wisecracking alien from the planet Melmac who crash-landed into the Tanner family's garage, and then their lives. The premise alone was ridiculous, but that was the point. ALF, short for Alien Life Form, wasn't just another puppet or special effect. He was a full-blown sitcom character with a personality so strong it made the show feel both absurd and oddly relatable. He ate cats, argued with the family, and dropped punchlines sharper than most human comedians. Beneath all the weirdness, ALF was a story about connection, a lonely alien trying to fit in with a family that didn't quite know what to do with him. The combination of science fiction and domestic comedy was totally unique, and it worked better than anyone expected. ALF's sarcasm and the Tanner family's exasperation became a weekly comfort to viewers everywhere. Kids loved the puppet, adults loved the wit. Even today, that shaggy alien in sunglasses remains one of the strangest, most charming creations the 1980s ever gave us. Few sitcoms captured pure joy quite like Perfect Strangers. When Larry Appleton, a serious young man chasing the American dream, suddenly found himself sharing an apartment with his exuberant, naive cousin Balky from the fictional Mediterranean island of Mypos, the culture clash was comedy gold. Balky's broken English, unfiltered optimism, and constant misunderstandings clashed hilariously with Larry's control freak tendencies. Together, they made a pair that could turn even the simplest situation, like grocery shopping or dancing, into a masterpiece of physical comedy. What made the show work was its heart. Beneath the endless laughs and catchphrases like, "Don't be ridiculous," was a friendship that showed how differences could make people stronger. It was silly but sincere, reminding audiences that kindness and patience could overcome anything, even a goat-herding cousin who thought everything in America was magical. The show's upbeat tone made it perfect for the 1980s, when optimism and big dreams were part of pop culture's DNA. By the end of its run, Perfect Strangers had cemented itself as a symbol of laughter, friendship, and the weird but wonderful chaos of trying to belong. If you wanted a sitcom that could make you laugh and still surprise you, Night Court was it. Set in a Manhattan courtroom that never slept, the show revolved around the unflappable Judge Harry Stone, a magic-loving, jazz-listening oddball who somehow kept order among the chaos. Every night brought in a parade of bizarre defendants, protesters, pranksters, and plenty of repeat offenders, and an even more eccentric crew of lawyers and clerks. The humor was sharp, rapid-fire, and often surreal, but the show's secret weapon was its warmth. Amid the slapstick and one-liners, Night Court showed compassion for the strange, the lost, and the misunderstood. The mix of courtroom antics and human stories made it stand out from the typical workplace sitcom. The cast chemistry, especially between Harry Anderson, John Larroquette, and Marky Post, kept the show alive for nearly a decade. It was unpredictable, heartfelt, and often ahead of its time in addressing real social issues under layers of absurd comedy. When the gavel finally dropped in 1992, Night Court had already earned its spot as one of the most uniquely funny and oddly touching shows of the 1980s. The Facts of Life began as a simple spin-off of Diff'rent Strokes, but it grew into something much more. Set in a girls' boarding school, it followed a group of teens learning about friendship, mistakes, and growing up under the guidance of their patient house mother, Mrs. Garrett. What made the show special was how it blended humor with honesty. Sure, it had plenty of silly moments, food fights, crushes, and awkward dances, but it also tackled topics most sitcoms avoided. The girls dealt with peer pressure, body image, and the challenge of finding their place in the world. Yet through it all, The Facts of Life remained lighthearted and hopeful. Each episode felt like a gentle lesson wrapped in laughter, the kind of comfort television that families could watch together without worry. By the time it ended in 1988, viewers had grown up alongside Blair, Joe, Natalie, and Tootie. It proved that a show didn't need wild gimmicks to be funny, just heart, humor, and a reminder that you really do take the good, you take the bad. In the 1980s, sitcoms loved breaking the mold, and Who's the Boss did it beautifully. Tony Danza played Tony McKelly, a retired baseball player who took a job as a live-in housekeeper for Angela Bauer, a successful advertising executive and single mother. The setup flipped traditional gender roles, creating endless opportunities for both humor and heart. Tony's warmth and street-smart charm clashed perfectly with Angela's structured, work-obsessed personality. Their chemistry was undeniable, sparking years of will they or won't they tension that kept audiences hooked. At its core, the show was about family, the unconventional kind that proves love and respect can build stronger bonds than blood alone. Tony's daughter Samantha and Angela's son Jonathan added layers of tenderness, grounding the comedy in real emotion. The show tackled ideas about independence, equality, and changing family roles without ever losing its laughs. Who's the Boss felt like the 1980s itself, confident, evolving, and full of optimism for what modern families could look like. It wasn't just funny, it was quietly revolutionary, disguised as a feel-good sitcom. No list of weirdly wonderful 1980s sitcoms would be complete without Small Wonder. The premise was bizarre even by television standards. A robotics engineer secretly built a robot girl named Vicky and passed her off as his daughter. The result? A perfectly deadpan child who spoke in monotone and lifted refrigerators without blinking. The show's special effects were minimal, but its heart was enormous. It mixed science fiction absurdity with family comedy in a way that was both ridiculous and oddly sweet. Vicky's attempts to fit in, learning emotions, going to school, and dealing with nosy neighbors mirrored the struggles of any kid trying to figure out the world. Audiences couldn't help but root for her, even when the jokes were cheesy or the premise stretched logic beyond recognition. What made Small Wonder special was its sincerity. It wasn't trying to be clever or cynical, it genuinely believed in the power of family, no matter how unconventional. And maybe that's why, decades later, people still remember that stiff little robot girl who somehow managed to teach everyone what it meant to be human. Mama's Family took its roots from a sketch on The Carol Burnett Show and turned it into a full-blown sitcom about a sharp-tongued matriarch named Thelma Harper. Played by Vicki Lawrence, Mama was a walking storm of sarcasm, stubbornness, and slapstick humor. Living in small-town America with her eccentric relatives, she dealt with everyday chaos in ways only she could, by yelling, fussing, and ultimately loving her family through it all. The show combined quick one-liners, outrageous misunderstandings, and over-the-top Southern charm. Every argument felt like a comedy showdown, with Mama always getting the last word. Despite its wild tone, Mama's Family had a genuine heart. Beneath the snark and shouting was a relatable story about families sticking together through thick and thin. It captured small-town life in all its messy glory, funny, loud, and endlessly entertaining. Vicki Lawrence's performance anchored it all, giving Mama just enough warmth to balance the sass. Decades later, her blue dress and gray wig remain iconic symbols of 1980s sitcom gold. If Silver Spoons had been a toy catalog come to life, it wouldn't have looked much different. The show followed Ricky Stratton, a young boy who moved in with his wealthy, fun-loving father, Edward, after his parents' divorce. Their home looked like every kid's dream, a mansion filled with arcade machines, go-karts, and even a working train running through the living room. But beyond the fantasy, Silver Spoons was about learning what money can't buy: responsibility, kindness, and connection. Ricky brought structure to his father's carefree lifestyle, while Edward taught his son to loosen up and enjoy life. The chemistry between Joel Higgins and a young Ricky Schroeder made the father-son bond both funny and heartfelt. The show also reflected the 1980s obsession with wealth and luxury, but always with a wink. It reminded viewers that even in a mansion full of gadgets, the real treasures were laughter and love. Silver Spoons gave audiences a weekly escape into wish fulfillment, while gently grounding it with lessons that still resonate today. Few shows in television history balanced humor and humanity quite like Diff'rent Strokes. The story followed Arnold and Willis Jackson, two brothers from Harlem adopted by a wealthy widower, Mr. Drummond. Their move into a Park Avenue penthouse created endless culture clashes and comic misunderstandings. Gary Coleman as Arnold became a phenomenon. His expressive face, quick wit, and the now legendary catchphrase, "What you talking about, Willis?" turned him into one of the decade's most beloved stars. But underneath the laughs, the show addressed deeper themes, race, class, and belonging, with surprising grace. It was funny, yes, but also warm and grounded in compassion. Audiences connected to the genuine affection between the characters, which made every heartfelt moment land even harder. Diff'rent Strokes became more than a sitcom. It was a message about family, understanding, and finding common ground in a divided world. Long after it ended, Arnold's grin and that unforgettable catchphrase still echo through pop culture as reminders of the laughter that brought people together. In Charles in Charge, Scott Baio played the world's most patient college student/babysitter, living with a suburban family and helping raise their kids while keeping his own life on track. Charles was the cool older brother everyone wished they had, laid back, responsible, and always ready with advice that somehow made sense even in chaos. Every episode revolved around him juggling teenage drama, romantic mishaps, and his own college responsibilities without losing that relaxed grin. The humor came from his attempts to stay calm amid the madness, a skill that made him the rock of the household. The show reflected a softer side of 1980s sitcoms, clean, upbeat, and centered on family values. It didn't try to reinvent comedy, it just made people feel good. The catchy theme song, "New Boy in the Neighborhood," became a little anthem for a generation that grew up with Charles as their moral compass. Charles in Charge was simple but sincere, a feel-good snapshot of 1980s optimism where every problem could be solved with kindness, patience, and maybe a cheesy grin. When Gimme a Break hit television, Nell Carter brought an energy that instantly stole the spotlight. She played Nell Harper, a tough but loving housekeeper who stepped in to help a widowed police chief raise his three daughters. What could have easily been a standard sitcom about domestic life turned into something so much more because of Carter's powerhouse personality. Her sharp wit, quick timing, and soulful voice made every episode sing, sometimes literally. The humor came naturally, but what made the show special was its heart. Nell wasn't just cleaning a house, she was holding a family together. The daughters brought their own teenage chaos, while the father tried to maintain control, and Nell balanced it all with sass and compassion. The show tackled serious topics, from grief to growing up, without ever losing its warmth or laughter. Carter's performance was magnetic, giving the show both comedy and soul. Gimme a Break captured the spirit of the 1980s by blending sharp humor with genuine emotion, proving that family didn't have to be perfect to be strong. Every wisecrack and heartfelt moment reminded viewers that love could make even the most chaotic household feel like home. Head of the Class took the classic high school sitcom and turned it upside down. Instead of focusing on detention-bound delinquents, it followed a group of overachieving geniuses in an honors program, kids who could quote Shakespeare but struggled with everyday life. Their teacher, Charlie Moore, played by Howard Hesseman, wasn't the strict academic type. He was a free spirit who used humor and life lessons instead of test prep to get through to his students. The result was a show that mixed intellectual jokes with the kind of heart only an 80s sitcom could deliver. Each episode balanced clever dialogue with relatable teenage emotions, crushes, insecurities, and the pressure to succeed. The kids were nerdy, eccentric, and lovable, creating a dynamic that felt fresh and honest. It celebrated intelligence without ever being smug, showing that being smart didn't mean having it all figured out. Head of the Class became a quiet inspiration for students watching at home, proving that learning could be funny and teachers could be heroes in denim jackets. It made being different cool long before that became mainstream. Bob Newhart's second hit series, simply titled Newhart, felt like a warm escape into small-town absurdity. He played Dick Loudon, a mild-mannered author who moved with his wife Joanna to run a cozy inn in rural Vermont. But instead of peace and quiet, Dick found himself surrounded by a collection of lovable weirdos, handymen, neighbors, and guests who seemed to live in their own comedic universe. Newhart's dry, understated reactions to their chaos became the heart of the humor. Every punchline landed softly but perfectly, thanks to his impeccable timing and trademark deadpan style. The small-town setting gave the show a quirky charm, full of offbeat situations and unforgettable characters like Larry, Daryl, and his other brother Daryl. Over time, Newhart became a television comfort zone, the kind of gentle comedy that drew laughter through its simplicity. And when the series ended in 1990, it delivered one of the greatest twists in sitcom history, revealing that the entire show had been a dream of Newhart's previous character from The Bob Newhart Show. It was meta before meta was even a thing, and it cemented Bob Newhart's status as television's quiet genius. Mr. Belvedere took the classic idea of the proper British butler and dropped him right into an all-American household, and the result was pure comedic charm. Christopher Hewitt played Lynn Belvedere, a refined, sharp-tongued butler who took a job managing the chaotic Owens family in suburban Pennsylvania. Between the sloppy kids, the grumpy father, and the constant cultural misunderstandings, Belvedere always managed to stay one step ahead, armed with cutting wit and impeccable manners. What made the show work wasn't just the humor, it was the respect underneath the sarcasm. Belvedere genuinely cared for the family, guiding them through everyday problems with wisdom disguised as dry one-liners. His diary entries at the end of each episode offered clever reflections that wrapped everything together with a touch of British class. Mr. Belvedere struck the perfect balance between sophistication and slapstick, turning cultural differences into lessons about empathy and understanding. It made audiences laugh, but it also reminded them that wisdom can come from the unlikeliest places, even a manservant with an endless supply of patience and polished comebacks. Before political satire became a genre of its own, there was Benson. Robert Guillaume starred as Benson Dubois, a sharp, intelligent butler who found himself working in the governor's mansion after his stint in the outrageous world of soap. The show flipped expectations by putting Benson, a man used to running households, in the middle of government dysfunction. His dry humor and quick wit allowed him to outthink every bureaucrat, political rival, and occasionally even the governor himself. Guillaume's performance was magnetic, full of charm and bite, giving the character both authority and warmth. The comedy came from watching Benson navigate red tape with one eyebrow raised, dismantling foolish decisions with a perfectly timed comment. But beyond the laughs, Benson offered social commentary wrapped in clever writing, showing that intelligence and integrity could triumph even in the messiest political environments. By the end of the series, Benson had risen through the ranks, proving that good sense and humor could take you far. It was both a sitcom and a quiet statement about perseverance and self-respect. Benson left audiences laughing, thinking, and cheering for the man who could always get the last word. Kate and Allie was one of the first sitcoms to show that family could look a little different and still be just as funny, warm, and real. Susan St. James and Jane Curtin starred as two divorced mothers who decided to move in together and raise their kids under one roof. What followed was a witty, relatable look at modern life, filled with both hilarious clashes and heartfelt moments. The two women had completely different personalities. Kate was carefree and impulsive, while Allie was practical and cautious. Their friendship became the show's foundation, proving that love and support didn't always have to come from romance. The humor came from everyday struggles, dating disasters, parenting headaches, and career challenges, but it never lost its optimism. The show handled its progressive themes with subtlety, never preaching, but always empowering. Kate and Allie resonated with viewers because it reflected the reality of so many families in the 1980s, imperfect, adaptive, and endlessly resilient. It was a sitcom that made you laugh, nod in recognition, and believe that friendship really could get you through anything. If the 1980s loved anything, it was big families and bigger laughs, and Just the 10 of Us delivered both. A spin-off of Growing Pains, The show followed Coach Graham Lubbock, his patient wife Elizabeth, and their 8 children as they navigated life, love, and laundry in one hilariously overcrowded household. The humor was as chaotic as the family itself. Kids shouting over each other, teenage drama exploding daily, and a father just trying to keep his sanity intact. But beneath the madness was genuine warmth. The Lubbocks weren't perfect, but they were full of heart. Each child had a distinct personality, creating a colorful mix of relatable family moments and slapstick fun. The show managed to balance wholesome values with the quick wit that defined the decade's best comedies. It wasn't about perfection, it was about perseverance, with a punchline. Just the 10 of us captured what it meant to find joy in the chaos, reminding viewers that no matter how noisy life got, family always came first, even if you had to shout to be heard. Few shows embodied the cozy, middle-class charm of 1980s television quite like the Hogan family. It began as Valerie, starring Valerie Harper, as the matriarch of a typical suburban household, but when she left the show, it continued with Sandy Duncan stepping in as Aunt Sandy. The transition was surprisingly smooth because the real star of the show was the family dynamic itself. The Hogans were a down-to-earth bunch, dealing with teenage sons, work, school, and everyday drama, with humor that felt authentic and familiar. It was never flashy or over the top. Instead, it thrived on warmth and relatable storytelling. Jason Bateman, as the quick-witted teenage son, brought a spark of sarcasm that balanced perfectly with the show's sweetness. The Hogan family wasn't trying to make headlines, it was trying to make people smile, and it did that beautifully. It felt like a sitcom you could drop into anytime and feel right at home. For many viewers, it remains the definition of feel-good television. Simple, honest, and full of laughter that still feels genuine decades later. Too Close for Comfort took the idea of an overprotective dad to hilarious new extremes. Ted Knight starred as Henry Rush, a cartoonist who couldn't quite separate his family life from his art, or his adult daughters' personal lives. When his daughters decided to rent out the apartment below his San Francisco home, Henry's world turned upside down. Every episode became a tug-of-war between his parental instincts and their growing independence. Knight's delivery, equal parts bluster and vulnerability, made Henry both infuriating and lovable. The daughters' quick comebacks kept him on his toes, creating comedy that was both fast-paced and affectionate. The show perfectly captured the clash between old-school values and the changing attitudes of the 1980s. It was about learning to let go, one punchline at a time. Too Close for Comfort thrived on its relatable family squabbles and Ted Knight's comic genius. By the end of every episode, no matter how stubborn Henry had been, love always won, and that mix of humor and heart made it a staple of the decade's family sitcoms. It's a Living offered something different, a workplace comedy centered entirely around women. Set in a chic restaurant high above Los Angeles, it followed a group of waitresses juggling their jobs, friendships, and dreams while dealing with difficult customers and flirtatious managers. The humor came from the women's quick banter and relatable struggles, but what made the show stand out was its glamorous backdrop and ensemble cast. Each character brought her own spark: the optimist, the cynic, the dreamer, and the realist. Together, they created a believable, funny, and refreshingly female-driven sitcom long before that was common. The show celebrated independence, ambition, and the power of camaraderie, all while serving up jokes with a side of sophistication. It went through cast changes and even a temporary cancellation, but its fans stayed loyal, bringing it back to syndication. It's a Living managed to mix sharp wit with heartfelt moments, proving that comedy could be elegant without losing its edge. It remains one of the most underrated gems of 1980s television, smart, stylish, and filled with laughter that still feels modern today. When Webster first aired, it instantly drew comparisons to Diff'rent Strokes, another show about a young boy finding family in an unexpected place. But it quickly proved it had its own unique magic. Emmanuel Lewis played Webster Long, a tiny, big-hearted orphan adopted by a former football player and his wife, played by Alex Karras and Susan Clark. What started as a simple premise blossomed into one of the most heartfelt comedies of the 1980s. Lewis's charm carried the show. His expressions, quick wit, and natural warmth made Webster impossible not to love. The series balanced humor and sentiment perfectly, capturing the ups and downs of family life without becoming overly sweet. Episodes often dealt with serious issues, loneliness, loss, and growing pains, but always found the light within them. The chemistry between the cast felt genuine, like a real family figuring things out together. Webster's innocence and optimism became a symbol of hope in a decade obsessed with bigger, louder entertainment. He reminded viewers that family wasn't about perfection. It was about love, laughter, and showing up for each other. The show's legacy endures because it dared to mix real emotion with sitcom simplicity. In a time filled with outlandish comedies, Webster stood out for keeping things sincere. It made us laugh, tear up, and remember that kindness never goes out of style. The Jeffersons, 1975 to 1985. Though it began in the 70s, its 80s run cemented its legacy of sharp humor and social satire. By the 1980s, The Jeffersons had already become television royalty, but its later years truly solidified its place as one of America's most iconic sitcoms. George and Louise Jefferson, played by Sherman Hemsley and Isabel Sanford, had moved on up, but they still carried the same mix of sass, humor, and heart that made audiences love them. The show's genius lay in its balance. It was laugh-out-loud funny while tackling real issues like race, class, and ambition with a fearless, satirical edge. George's loudmouth bravado clashed hilariously with Louise's grounded wisdom, creating the perfect comedic rhythm. Their bickering was classic, but beneath it all was deep affection and mutual respect. Supporting characters like Florence, the sharp-tongued maid, and Tom and Helen Willis, the interracial couple next door, gave the show endless comedic fuel while pushing boundaries for representation on TV. Even as the decade changed, the Jeffersons stayed relevant, reflecting how success didn't erase the challenges of identity and pride. The show made you laugh, but it also made you think. A rare combination that kept viewers coming back week after week. When it finally ended in 1985 after more than 250 episodes, it left behind not just a legacy of humor, but a blueprint for every socially conscious sitcom that came after. It was bold, funny, and unashamedly real. Everything a great 1980s show should be. Square Pegs, 1982 to 1983. Sarah Jessica Parker's early role in a short-lived but beloved teen sitcom about awkward high school outsiders. Square Pegs might have lasted only one season, but for anyone who saw it, it was unforgettable. The show followed two best friends, Patty, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Lauren, Amy Linker, as they struggled to fit in at Weema High School. They weren't popular, glamorous, or confident. They were the outsiders who never quite got it right, and that made them instantly relatable. In a decade obsessed with perfection, Square Pegs celebrated imperfection. Its humor came from small, painfully real moments, failed crushes, embarrassing mistakes, and the desperate hope of being noticed. The dialogue was fast, awkward, and full of teenage honesty, capturing the rhythm of real adolescent life in a way few shows dared to. Parker's natural charm and vulnerability made Patty stand out as a character who felt genuinely human, long before she became a style icon on Sex and the City. The show's blend of punk rock attitude, Valley Girl slang, and heartfelt storytelling made it a cult favorite. Critics loved it for being smart and ahead of its time, even if audiences were slow to catch on. Though it was canceled after just 20 episodes, Square Pegs remains a hidden gem of the 1980s, a funny, awkward, and authentic look at the teenage experience that still resonates with anyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong. Dear John, 1988 to 1992. A recently divorced man joining a singles support group gave viewers bittersweet, relatable laughs. Dear John took a premise that could have been sad, a man rebuilding his life after divorce, and turned it into a warm, gently funny portrait of human resilience. Judd Hirsch starred as John Lacey, an ordinary guy whose wife leaves him unexpectedly, forcing him to start over in both life and love. Lost and lonely, he stumbles into a singles support group filled with an unforgettable cast of quirky characters, each with their own heartbreaks and eccentricities. What made Dear John special was its mix of humor and honesty. It didn't shy away from the pain of starting over, but it always found a laugh in the awkwardness of second chances. The writing was clever, balancing wry observations about modern relationships with moments of genuine empathy. Hirsch's understated charm anchored the series, making John both sympathetic and funny, a man learning that life doesn't stop when marriage does. The ensemble cast brought warmth and wit to every meeting, their friendships becoming the emotional center of the show. Dear John felt different from other sitcoms of its time. It was slower, more reflective, and deeply human. It showed that even after loss, laughter could still find a way in. For anyone navigating change, it was a quiet reminder that sometimes life's second act can be even richer than the first. The Duck Factory, 1984. A young Jim Carrey starred in this forgotten gem about animators struggling to make cartoons, weird, witty, and pure 80s. Before he became a movie star, Jim Carrey got his first taste of television fame in The Duck Factory, a short-lived but wonderfully offbeat sitcom. Set inside a struggling animation studio, the show followed Skip Tarkenton, an idealistic young animator who joined a team of overworked, eccentric cartoonists trying to keep their show alive. Carrey's trademark physical humor and goofball energy were already shining through, even in his earliest performances. The Duck Factory stood out because it blended the real world of television production with the wild imagination of cartoons. It was part satire, part workplace comedy, and completely unique. The characters were lovable misfits, burnt-out animators, snarky voice actors, and a boss constantly one crisis away from collapse. Each episode poked fun at the chaos behind the entertainment industry while celebrating creativity in all its messy glory. Critics praised its clever writing and originality, but it struggled to find an audience and ended after just 13 episodes. Still, it holds a special place in 1980s television history as a showcase of what was to come. Watching Carrey's performance today feels like seeing the spark that would later explode into superstardom. The Duck Factory might not have lasted, but it captured something rare: the awkward, joyful beginnings of a comedic genius and the pure, unpredictable spirit of 1980s creativity. So before you flip the channel, tell us which forgotten 80s sitcom made you laugh the hardest, then hit like, tap subscribe, and share your favorite memories in the comments so we can keep the laughter of that unforgettable decade alive together.